You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and joining me today, as he does every Friday for this Ferg Friday, Justin Ferguson with the Auburn Observer. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing really, really well. Braves are world champions. I love saying that. I love thinking about that. So I'm going to say it as much as I can.
It's not going to get old anytime soon, especially for Atlanta folks. I think that one's going to last for a long, long time.
Oh, man. I mean, it's rare that I get to just be a fan. I talked about it a little while back when I went to game 2 of the NLCS, but the next morning, I feel like I know, I feel closer to like what Auburn fans feel like, because the day after the World Series win, I woke up and I was sitting in my bed and I was just replaying the home runs from that game and finding the calls and doing all that stuff again. It's like, man, it's fun. It's fun to be a fan, and I don't get to do it a ton. And I had a lot of fun doing it this week and a lot of fun doing it this postseason.
Where does it relate? I know you're a big Golden State guy. Where does it relate with those championships?
Honestly, more because this is more of a shared experience, right? I tweeted about it the other day. I am a fourth generation Braves fan. My great grandfather, some of my earliest memories of him was watching the Braves with him and talking about the Braves with him. He passed it on to his son, who passed it on to his son, who is my dad. And then on the other side of my family, my mother was born in Atlanta, and I was born in Atlanta too. But that side of the family is from Atlanta, and so grew up going to Braves games. And so it's like I've got multiple generations of the family all invested in this. I'm a Warriors fan because I love watching Steph Curry, and I have since he was at Davidson. And so celebrate that was cool, and it was more of an online thing though. And parts of this was, but I watched Game 6 of the World Series in the backyard of my parents' house. With my brother and 2 of my sisters and my parents, and it was really, really cool. And my brother lives out of the country, the one that's closest to me in age, and so we were FaceTiming him because he stayed up. Him and his wife stayed up to watch the game, and that was really, really cool. So it ranks up there. I mean, I don't know if I've really felt that since 2010 when Auburn won the national title, and I was a senior in high school. That was kind of the last time I think it was just like this big, family kind of experience, or very big collective experience of celebrating a championship.
Yeah. And you had the feeling something special was happening with this team, like you did with 2010. I think we all kind of knew a few weeks into it. It's like, this isn't normal. This doesn't feel like it's supposed to. And so, congrats to you and all the other Braves fans out there listening. It's pretty cool thing. Auburn takes on Texas A&M tomorrow, a very important matchup. It seems like the more Auburn wins, the more each of these games gets more and more important, because, even if they win tomorrow, the game against Mississippi State is going to be very important, especially if it's able to beat Arkansas. So just kind of, the murderous row of ranked opponent after ranked opponent. But depending on the day that I talk about this game, Ferg, one day I feel really confident that Auburn go to College Station and win. And other days I look at the offensive defensive line of the Aggies and I'm like, that's a pretty big mismatch. Can they overcome that? But your general thoughts about this matchup.
Yeah, this is a game where I think, I said it at Arkansas and I said it at Ole Miss. I said if Auburn plays a clean game, they're more talented than these teams are. They can win and win convincingly. They did both times, winning by double digits. This game is much more even. Yeah. And I like how Auburn is playing football better right now than I like A&M, but A&M's coming off an off week. A&M's at home. Those things, they still have everything to play for them. They need a little bit more help than Auburn does. Obviously, Auburn can win out and go to Atlanta. A&M's going to need a little help, but this is a big moment for them as well. And I think the thing that gets me is that A&M probably has the better defense on the whole, and they're playing at home, which is a big deal. Auburn's got the better quarterback in this game. And I'd say this, when was the last time Auburn had a game against a top 15, like a good ranked team away from home, and you go into that match and say Auburn's got the quarterback edge? And that speaks to how well Bo Nix is playing recently. That speaks to how well this offense is starting to click. And so it's going to be one of those things where it's like, can the quarterback difference make the difference in this one? because I think both of these teams want to run the ball, and they're both really good at stopping the run, and they're both
Right.
pretty strong defenses as a whole. But I like Auburn's quarterback more than I like A&M's quarterback. And it's like, is that enough to overcome the fact that this is a team that's a little bit more talented than you overall, and they're playing at home, and they're playing coming off of an off week? So, it's right down the middle. I think the line is exactly where it needs to be, because it's like, yeah, it's about home field advantage, basically.
Mm-hmm. I want to hear your thoughts, though, about the trenches here. I mean, what do you think about Auburn's ability to rush the passer in this situation? Because I think A&M's offensive line is really, really good.
Yeah, they're good. They start a lot of young guys too. That's the other thing. It's like, this is a unit that can be good, for a while. Auburn, I think Auburn has done a good job of getting after the quarterback last few weeks. Now, I think it's kind of gotten to a point where it's like, if Auburn's not sacking a dude or getting a hit on every play, it's like, they're not pressuring the quarterbacks. No, they're doing a really good job, I think, of getting after it. But yeah, that is a thing where, whatever it is for Calzada, like, again, Zac Calzada played an amazing game against Alabama, and he's capable of playing an amazing game. Obviously, we know that, but look at the last 2 weeks since that game. A little above 50% completion against Missouri and South Carolina. He has got to be one of those guys where it's like, if Auburn can say, hey, we can slow down your running game enough where he's going to have to win it for you, I like Auburn's chances, but they're going to have to get after him. Even still, though, even behind that offensive line, this is not a quarterback who has done a great job throwing the ball effectively and efficiently this year. He had an amazing game against Alabama, so that means he's capable of turning it on. Anybody can say that, but like, the rest of his numbers this season leave a lot to be desired. I want to know what kind of quarterback he actually is in a big game environment like this.
Yeah, and I think Alabama's the exception to the rule of who they are, but I mean, a lot went A&M's way in that game, and I'm not taking anything away from it. They had an outstanding game plan, and they executed.
Oh yeah.
But 2 red zone turnovers for Alabama, 2 special teams touchdowns for A&M. Like, that's, I mean, you should win. You should win when that stuff happens. You know what I mean? And like,
right.
Is that going to happen again this season? Like, probably not.
Yeah. And like last year, go back to A&M last season when they beat Auburn. Kellen Mond had a really good game, but I mean, they pull away in the second half because they could run the ball. And the two-headed monster they have in that backfield, and also the fact that they like to get Anaya Smith the ball in space, like, those are real deal weapons. And so, like, Calzada might not be an amazing quarterback, but he has really good weapons around him and a good offensive line in front of him. So this is a real test for Auburn's defense. I like the way Auburn's defense is playing. You can't come out of that Ole Miss game and say, okay, you only gave up 20 points and be anywhere near disappointed in that. It's bend, don't break. And like, that's kind of modern football right now, and getting stops and that. And A&M's done a good job of doing that as well. So that's what makes it a really interesting matchup, is that I think the offense that can be the more, have the more sustained drives and run the ball well is going to be the one that wins the game. But it's easier said than done. And I like where Nick's is at right now, compared to his counterpart at A&M.
I'm not huge on the whole transitive property thing where, like, okay, right, Auburn held Ole Miss to 20 points, but there is value in that.
Oh, for sure.
Like, Ole Miss's offense, I don't care how banged up they were, is so much better than A&M's offense.
Yes.
And it's the fact, but Ole Miss was on the road. A&M's going to be at home. A&M had a bye week last week, but still, like, I'm just not sold they're going to score way more than 20 points tomorrow.
I think there's a real chance, these last few games for Auburn have been 30s, 20s kind of games. For a real chance the winner of this game might only score 24 or 28. And like, it could be either Auburn or A&M. Like, I'm not even coming close to thinking, I think earlier in the week when Auburn opened as like a 4.5 point dog or something like that, I was like, yeah, I probably would take Auburn in that scenario. But like, this is going to be another, kind of rough and tough 4-quarter game. It's going to look like a classic SEC West matchup, which is kind of funny because A&M is not a classic SEC West team. And games between Auburn and A&M have not been these kind of games. You go back to the first one, or the first two, really, kind of more shootout type of games. First 3, I should say. So
the first one was like 63-0, right?
Right. It was 63-21, 65-21, something like that. And then the next year, Auburn wins it.
I forgot who scored in that game.
They scored in that game. It wasn't the Georgia game. I don't remember.
Oh, gosh.
And but the next year, 40-point shootout. The next year, high scoring game, in 14. This one I think is like, these are two teams that want to control the ball and run it and play off of that running game and then play really good defense with it, good complementary football. And it's just going to be a matter of who does a better job of that on Saturday. And I think the thing about it is you can look at Auburn, make a case for Auburn this season being the more consistent in that regard. A&M's had the higher peak. They've beaten Alabama, but they've also had the lower valleys in the fact that they lost to State and they lost to Arkansas. And They only scored 10 against Colorado.
Right. It's a Ferg Friday. Justin Ferguson, our guest on today's show. Today's show brought to you by our friends at McDonald's, proudly serving community since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty and affordable food. It's also a place where friends and family can gather and reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing that they will have dependable Wi-Fi regardless of which McDonald's location that they go to. And of course, endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Or you can go in the morning. I know I saw a lot of people in YouTube comments earlier this week talking about how much they love McDonald's breakfast. They've got it going on all the time. So once again, this show brought to you by McDonald's. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. Also, attention to business owners and high-income professionals. If you've considered funding a 401k or an IRA, you are potentially creating a massive tax burden on your future self when you retire. It just postpones it postpones the tax and postpones tax calculation. So Ethan Dahl, the owner of Innovative Financial Solutions, would love to take a few minutes to talk with you about your financial planning. Ethan's the best in the business when it comes to this, and he really understands the tax code and how you can keep your money when you retire. You can contact Ethan at 251-243-6038 or email Ethan at ethandahl.com. Ethan Dahl, your alternative to traditional financial planning. I just realized I put the wrong name up there on the YouTube video. My apologies. It's a Ferg Friday here. Tell folks what's going on at the Auburn Observer this week.
Yeah, busy week at the Observer. Film room on Monday was on the amount of 2 and 3 tight end personnel Auburn used against Ole Miss and kind of hammered them. Real interesting to see if they'll do the same against A&M this week. Did a story on Auburn's run defense and why that is going to be, why they're so good. And number two, why that is going to be so critical this weekend against A&M. Did a story I know on, this podcast would be well received. Did a story on Wednesday on Zep Jasper.
Yes.
Why I am big on his upside for this season and how critical he's going to be for the Tigers. Podcast came up on Thursday. We previewed the Auburn exhibition game, and we also previewed Auburn Texas A&M with our friend Max Olson from The Athletic. And over the weekend, we're going to have coverage of Auburn A&M because by the time you're listening to this, I'll be headed to Texas. And, we'll be back on Sunday for the recap podcast and look ahead to the start of college basketball season.
Yeah, it's definitely the place to go. AuburnObserver.com. Look forward to your emails every single morning. Comes right to your phone. It's awesome. It's great. And now that it's basketball season, basketball's right around the corner, you're going to have all that covered too. So that'll be awesome. AuburnObserver.com. Yeah, we were talking about some of the previous matchups with this Auburn and Texas A&M series. And I was going through the 2015 game because I was just looking at all the games that were at College Station. I forgot that Kyler Murray was there. I just forgot that Auburn totally owned that dude.
And Jeremy Johnson had his comeback game that game in 15. Yeah.
Jeremy Johnson outplayed Kyler Murray in 2015. What? What was that?
It's a weird series, and it's been a weird series in the fact that I think last year was the first time 2 years ago was the first time the home team won a game in this series. So it's it's one of those situations where it's a weird matchup, and A&M is one of the few teams they're not Georgia and they're not Alabama in terms of talent, but they're kind of in that LSU Florida range of they're going to be slightly above you, but not too far ahead of you where it's this massive talent gap.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like LSU in that feels like they always have been just kind of a little bit off. And of course, A&M or LSU figured it out 2 years ago. A&M, still trying to get over that hump, and they came so close to doing it last season, and they were just really boring in the process too. So I'm interested to see, is A&M going to finally get that quarterback that's going to get them over the hump? Because I don't think any of the guys they've got right now are it. So we'll see.
I'm right there with you, but it seems like of all the years where they've had a ton of talent and they just haven't been able to pull it together, except for last year, and it was just kind of a waste.
And they lost the game that mattered.
They lost the most important one. That's exactly right.
And didn't even come close in that game either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the whole Bo on the road thing, that's dead, right? Like we're expecting him to be a pretty solid quarterback Saturday.
He was pretty solid against Penn State. And of course the win against LSU, where he had to do pretty much everything to make that happen. And then probably the best game of his career, I think, against a quality opponent against Arkansas. Yeah, I'm expecting him to play well. I mean, like, A&M's got a really good defense. Last week against Ole Miss, it looked easy. Like, Auburn was not doing anything like very funky or creative through the passing game. It was just dudes were getting open and he was hitting them. And like A&M, Mike Elko is too good of a defensive coordinator to let that happen regularly against this team. He's no DJ Durkin because DJ Durkin is not only a bad defense coordinator but a bad person. And you've got a defense here that is going to make things tougher. I think they're tougher than Arkansas. I think they're tougher than Penn State. Definitely tougher than LSU in certain regards.
Sure.
But yeah, it's like, all right, Bo, you have played really, really well these last few weeks. You're coming off the best month of your career. All right, now you got to do it against a team that this is probably going to be the best defensive test you face all season besides Alabama in just terms of pure talent.
Right. Yeah. So how do you think they do that? How do you think they get these wide receivers open for Bo Nix to be able to find them?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some games this year where A&M's kind of struggled a little bit with the running game. I think they're going to want to play off of that. There's been some games where teams have averaged like 4 or 5 yards. Gary Bama even did it as well. Mm-hmm. So I expect Auburn to try to, run some play action stuff. Make A&M respect, when you do 1, 2, 3 tight end sets, like make A&M respect that you have the threat to run the ball. But then we've seen that Auburn can be explosive in some traditionally non-explosive sets. And I think that's kind of the beauty of this Auburn offense is that this season they get into some sets and some situations where you're like, well, they're obviously running the ball. And it's like, oh, nope, here's a 35-yard gain right over your head. And I think that's the way to play a really good defense like this is that, you got to keep them guessing. You have to keep them guessing, and the opposite is true as well. Like, not only can you throw the ball downfield when you're in these tight sets, but when you do spread them out and you do try to get some things isolated, run the ball right at them, kind of hammer it away. Let Bo Nix use his legs. He did a great job of that these last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's just for Auburn, it's just keep doing what you're doing on offense because it's working. But this is just going to be kind of the ultimate test. You have been able to keep Ole Miss and Arkansas off balance with the way you've been playing offense. You got to do the same thing with A&M. You got to have a few more wrinkles and tricks up your sleeve, I think. But, part of the Harsin and Bobo offense and part of the hires in general is be consistently great. And in this game, I think it's just find the game plan that works well for you and make sure that team on the other side of the ball, even if they're a little bit more talented than you, doesn't know what's coming. And I think that's going to be key in this matchup. I think this is going to be a very good, coaching strategic kind of game plan head-to-head matchup. Like the best coach team and the best executed game plan is going to win this one because I think these two teams are very, very even.
As far as, assuming no one gets hurt, as far as rotation and personnel, do you think this is kind of who we're going to see for the rest of the season? Or do you think there's any chance that there could be somebody else emerge, one of the younger receivers possibly, or maybe some of the younger defenders, maybe crack the rotation a little bit more? Or do you think this is it?
This is probably it. I think they figured out, and the 2 wins, speak for themselves.
Right.
I think they figured out that they can. Here's the one thing I found interesting is, Bo's throwing passes to 11 guys, against Arkansas and 10 against Ole Miss. Right. Mm-hmm. There were games where he would throw like 3 or 4. In the past. And so, like, even if a guy like Xavier Capers or a guy like Elijah Canyon isn't getting a high volume of target, they're getting out there on the field. They're getting opportunities. Right. It just might be a little bit more diminished. I think you're seeing the pecking order established. But when you see guys like Landon King on the field And when you see guys like, Sean Shivers play a role, even though he's the number 3 running back, like, I think they have clearly defined roles, and this is who it's going to be moving forward on offense. But that is also a big tent. That is a very, very big tent. You're using pretty much all your tight ends. You're giving pretty much all your receivers who have played this season some options, and you're using all 3 of your running backs. Defensively, if everybody's healthy, I think that might shrink a little bit, might tighten up a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But we're seeing in certain spots they're not afraid to rotate and move guys around and just trying to find competition. And I think that's big at the line of scrimmage, because one of the more impressive things this season for Auburn is both on the offensive line and the defensive line. They played really well these last few weeks, and they are constantly rotating up there, up front.
No, they've looked good. And you mentioned injuries and stuff. Owen Papo's return is crazy how much of an impact he has. I mean, just the spark that he brings to all the guys around him. He is incredible. He is so good.
He's really, really good. He's your most athletic linebacker. He's one of your most athletic players, period. He's going to give you an opportunity. He said it earlier this week. There's going to be some chances where, because of the personnel, A&M's they're going to run some true 3 linebacker sets out there. And the way Wooten has played this season, the way Zacoby's playing, period, and having Owen back out there, I mean, that is a real deal weapon for your offense. You've got Colby Wooden playing some of the best ball of his career. I think the edge rushers are really starting to get used to things, and the defensive backs are having less blow ups and less breakdowns in the back end. I think one of the biggest things they did last week against Ole Miss was that Ole Miss didn't have a play of over 20 yards until the second half, and then in the second half they had 2 kind of right in a row, and then then Auburn stopped them. So I mean, they're doing a good job of keeping everything in front of them. That's the type of defense you're trying to play. It's very much an NFL-like defense. We talk about Auburn having an NFL-like offense in terms of, scheme, execution, kind of all the different variety there. I think you're seeing Derek Mason do the same thing on that, where it's like, we know you're not going to dominate. We're not going to dominate you. It's very, very hard to dominate anybody. Not everybody can beat Georgia.
Sure.
But what we can do is we can keep everything in front of you and frustrate you to the point where if we're at our best on third downs and we're at our best in the red zone, we can win a lot of football games with that formula. And that's the type of team, that's the type of defense that lasts a lot longer. If you can't beat Georgia or you can't beat peak Alabama, do this. It works. It works really well in college football.
No, you're right. And I love the focus on limiting points, not really caring about the yards. That's a big part of it. Today's show brought to you by betonline.ag. It's the best place on the internet to place your sports wagers. And you can do that by heading over to betonline.ag. On your laptop, your desktop, your mobile device, they've got you covered across the board. And when you make your first deposit at BetOnline, use promo code LOCKEDON to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. betonline.ag, where the game starts. Today's show also brought to you by Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. It looks and tastes like a candy bar, covered 100% in pure, beautiful, delicious chocolate. All the bars are delicious. They've got a flavor for everyone. Check them all out at built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Justin Ferguson, our guest. So when you put out a tweet for mailbag questions earlier today, somebody asked you about the Prize Picks, which is a partner that we have here on the show. It's just a daily fantasy type thing, but I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Let's do it.
The number that Prize Picks has Saturday for Bo Nix is 219.5 passing yards.
Over.
That's what I'm thinking too. I'm not even hesitating for that.
Yeah, over. I think Auburn would love to win the game without Bo hitting that number, but also, you're now coming to expect Bo to have 230, 240, 250, all the way up to 270 or 280 kind of games right now. And looking at A&M's defense this season, they're good, but the way Bo is completing passes, that you can get to 230, completing 15, 20 something passes or, in this game. So I think that's definitely the kind of balance that they're going to want to have.
They have Zach Calzone at 184.5. That one's tougher for me. I think I'm doing over, but I'm not confident about it at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scenario where Auburn holds him to under that, and it's because
they win in that situation, don't they?
They definitely win in that situation. But yeah, it's like, again, my big thing this week is A&M, and I think Calzada in general. are these the guys that beat Alabama, or are these the guys that scored 10 points against Arkansas and Colorado, a very bad Colorado team?
Right.
These last 2 weeks they played, before the bye week, they played Missouri and South Carolina. They ran all over them. Calzada didn't play really well, but efficiency wise, but it didn't really matter. So it's like I think the truth is somewhere towards the middle, but I also know that Auburn's doing a pretty good job right now. I mean, they gave Matt Corral, I don't know if you guys realize this, that was Matt Corral. That was the first game of Matt Corral's starting career at Ole Miss when he did not have a touchdown pass. And I know he was injured for a little while in that one as well, but like
his arm seemed fine. His arm's
fine. His arm was fine. Yeah, they've done a really good job of limiting guys really since the Penn State game. As it's done a really good job of limiting really good offensive players to lower tier performances than they're used to.
Right. For rushing yards, let's see. They've got Tank Bigsby at 83.5.
Ooh, over. Yeah, but I think
under on this one.
You're thinking under on this one. Like, we'll see. I mean, like, I see Auburn being able to bust a couple on them. But I feel like this is a game where Tank gets 20 or 25 carries. And at that point, it's like if you average around 4, you'll hit it. Maybe a little less.
That's true.
I'm interested to see that A&M front is really, really good. But I think, man, Tank looked back to his old self last week. And it was interesting. This is not I don't want to say this and it sound like shade toward the other player I'm talking about here, because it's definitely not. But I think we did see in the game against Ole Miss why Tank is still the number one guy, and Jarquez Hunter, one, he's a freshman.
He's 18.
For crying out loud. But number two, I think Tank's got a little bit better tackle breaking ability, whereas Jarquez has a little bit more down, big play ability.
Right.
So you need a little bit better blocking. To maybe a bigger holes for him to kind of hit the jets.
For the
Tank can kind
of
Tank can kind of do more for you breaking tackles, and I think that's key in a game like this against A&M.
They've got Bo Nix at 23.5 rushing. I'm slamming the over on that one.
Yeah, I don't want to. I feel weird because it's like this is like become weirdly positive for me, where I'm like, yeah, Auburn's all over, A&M's all under. No, I think they've got to run him. They've got to run him. Play 11 on 11 in the red zone. That was the key against Ole Miss, and I think it'll be the key again in this one.
Yeah, I mean, 2 of those plays gets you dang close to 23. Isaiah Spiller, A&M's running back, is at 84.5, and you're taking over. I think Auburn all in close to the line of scrimmage tomorrow.
And I think they will, but I also think Spiller's really good. And like
he may be the best back in the conference.
And like that's the thing is that Auburn did a really good job of limiting Arkansas. Like Arkansas and Ole Miss averaged a yard less than they're used to, than their average in their wins, and that was a big reason why they won. But it was still like 4. It was still like good running games are going to be able to make a little headway on them.
Yeah.
So,
and then last one. Kobe's the only Auburn receiving target that you can do for receiving yards, but they've got him at 45.5. And let's just take a second and talk about like Kobe Hudson is a natural wide receiver.
He's been the best receiver pretty much all season for Auburn. He's the most efficient. I have been #feed Kobe all season. Like I know he fumbled the ball, and I know he's had fumble.
Well, he's had 2 really like poorly timed fumbles, and I don't know if it's ever really a good time to fumble the football, but that could have been a really costly one at the end of the Ole Miss game.
Yeah, and Auburn did a really good job of defending after that. The thing with Kobe, man, it's like he doesn't drop the ball a lot. I mean, the fumbles are one thing, but like catching the ball, he's a very consistent catcher, and like he's done well going deep. He's been really good at the intermediate balls. He can do some of the short stuff, that extension of the running game. Like 40-something is. Again, Auburn might have one of those games where it's like, all right, 12 people caught passes and nobody got more than 30 or 40 yards, and it didn't matter because they were spreading the wealth, and it's still a good game. But like Kobe's got that upside. The only thing I kind of push back with Kobe with the yardage is he has not been the deep ball guy. That is Malcolm Johnson, Javarius Johnson, definitely Demetrius Robertson.
Right.
I wonder, maybe a game like this, is this the one where you finally see Kobe take the top off of defense? Because he's got the athleticism to do it. by far. He might not have the jets as some of those other guys do, but he's still really, really good. And has been, for a guy his size, being that good in those intermediate balls, I think gives me a little thing. It's like, man, if they want to throw one up there at him deep, he could definitely do it.
Yeah. Jay Ferg, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the shout out in the newsletter this week when you talked about
absolutely
Zep. Really appreciate that. And let's talk about basketball just for a second before I let you go. Yeah. But chatting with Zep and chatting with Coach Pruitt on the podcast earlier this week, I am jazzed. I am excited to watch these. There's just going to be so much energy, so much talent, but they're just going to be in your face, in your opponent's face. I mean, as much as possible this year. It's going to be some fun, aggressive style of basketball in Auburn Arena.
Yeah, I mean, they've got the talent that you've been wanting to have for a while.
Yeah.
And that is going to change it. And I think one of the things is this is going to be, I think, not only the most talented team Auburn's had in a long time, but I think this is the most balanced team Bruce has had. In the fact that they are going to be like, if they want to press you and get in your grill and, hound you on defense, they can, but they've got the length that if situationally that they can play more zone and they will be able to do that. They're going to be able to go inside out. They've got a 7-1 dude who can hit threes. Like that is rare, not just at Auburn, rare period. They'll be able to run and gun and do some of that 5-out stuff. The dribble drive kick out is going to be big, but like, this is also a team that when things get late in the shot clock, or you just say, hey, go get a bucket, you've got two big dudes down there that can score on the, down low. Like, in the past for Bruce, he's had, with Wiley and then the downhill attack they ran with Okoro and Dowdy and those guys, like they've had that kind of offense. Then they had the Final Four run where it was kind of run and gun. Like they've had that. This is going to be one that kind of blends both of those because like they can do the, oh my God, Auburn's going to drop 43 pointers on your head and they're going to do it really, really fast. But they can also be like, see that guy who's 6'10" and see that guy who's 7'1". We'll get the ball to him down low, and there's very few things that you're going to be able to do to slow him down. Like, so the balance, I think, is going to be good. This is going to be a team that, is going to be kind of matchup proof in terms of, like, I'm not saying they're going to win every game, obviously, but they're going to be matchup proof in this that, like, they're going to have an answer for every question another team throws at them, and then they're going to throw a ton of questions at the other team.
No matter what question you have, the answer is always Zep Jasper. That's my way of life moving forward.
The thing with Zep, man, like if Zep's not a starter, think about it. Think about it this way. There is potential for this team this year to have Zep and Jalen and like a Devin Cambridge all coming off the bench. If like that's your 6, 7, 8 guys
starter. I was surprised by that.
Yeah, and I think it's just the maximizing the flexibility and the value of bringing Zep in at the 1 or the 2, and he might start at the 2. I mean, I don't know, but like any way you go about it, like you're talking about your 8th and 9th guys coming off the bench being dudes that were regular contributors, either experienced starters not at the SEC level or elsewhere. Like that's kind of nuts to think about. And when you start thinking about playing matchups and playing rotations, like they'll be able to kind of do whatever they want out there.
Right. Jay Ferg, how can people sign up for the Auburn Observer? Give me all the deets.
AuburnObserver.com. Go there. Type in your email. You'll get an email. That email will give you a link to subscribe. $6 a month or $60 a year. Once you've paid and you're in, you are in. And everything we do gets sent straight to your inbox. Pretty much every day, it's either a newsletter or a podcast.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much, man. Talk to you next week. Be safe in Texas, all that good stuff. We'll be back Monday to recap everything over the weekend right here on Locked On Auburn.